Thank you, David, and thank you all for coming along on a beautiful evening where perhaps you'd rather be outside. Certainly beautiful evening here in the UK, which is something we've all been looking forward to, I think, in spring. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen, 1 second, and I've got some slides and some videos to share with you all to tell you about what we do. And I think I'm going to speak for 20 or 30 minutes, which I'm sure David will keep an eye on the time for me, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So as David said, my name is Kate Bradshaw and I farm Tanhouse Farm. More of this in a moment. So I'm just going to read out something very quickly to you. Sometimes when you reflect and look back, you realise that your passion, values and talents were there all along. It's just that maybe the time wasn't right and they were stored like a squirrel stores a nut for the time when she needs them, a time when she can return and dig them up. So keep that in mind, the idea of returning or refinding passions, values and talents. So the story so far. So as I said, I'm Kate, and myself and my wife Anna, we farm Tanhouse Farm, which is in Herefordshire. We farm 75 acres. We own 25 and we rent the remainder. We have 25 acres, which until 2016 was certified organic and biodynamic, but the then owner decided not to carry on with certification for various reasons. So it's wonderful, wonderful, rich grassland. 3 acres of woodland, and the remainder, as I say, is permanent pasture and has been for as long as anyone I can find can remember the land locally. Could everyone see my slides? If you can't, just shout or put something in the chat. This is Anna, and this is Angela in the background with the horns, one of our traditional Hereford cattle, and this is Middlewood End. All our fields have names, and I've checked out those names from old 18th century maps as well. So obviously there's Middlewood End and there's Wood End, so they were obviously having a very creative day that day when they decided what to name the fields. So what have we got? Okay, so we are a farm that is yes.
We can't see your slides, Kate.
Oh, thank you. Someone's telling me this. Right. Okay.
Yeah, me neither.
1 minute. Hang on. Let's try again. Can you see the slides now?
Yes, that's good.
Yes, I can see it now.
All right. So you heard that bit and the story so far, and here we go. That's a couple of pictures, but you would have heard what I said. Blah blah. So here we go. What have we got? So we are growing in terms of our animals, but at the moment we have 22 traditional Hereford cattle, a young example of which is on the right hand side. We have 42 Shetland sheep and 7 Ryland plain crosses. We're in the middle of lambing just now, which has given me an interesting day so far. The idea of lambing Shetlands is that Shetlands are as tough as the geographical island that is Shetland, so they lamb outside. They tend to get on with it, whereas the Ryland crosses are proving a little more in need of help on this occasion. So we had to give one ewe, a first time, a bit of help today, but generally everything is going smoothly. And the reason that we breed our own lambs and our own calves is because it's important to us to keep not entirely a closed herd, but not far off it, simply for health reasons, and because we can keep an eye on what's coming forward, which of the, if you like, the lambs or calves are producing the best specimens for us. We also have about 50 hens, and we do have 2 turkeys, which I was unable to kill for Christmas, so there you go, hence the oops. So they are just now pets wandering around, and in fact one of them is laying eggs, so if anybody wants any turkey eggs, you know where to come. In the spring and summer we have pigs. We have Gloucester Old Spots, which are absolutely delicious. They're a native breed, just as our Shetland sheep are and our traditional Hereford cattle. And our system, so everybody talks about their system, don't they, on a farm, but I think when I talk about my system, I might just say that it's about having the courage to make mistakes and learn from them. At the moment, the picture you're looking at is some of our traditional Herefords wandering around in Middlewood End, the field. So what is our system? Well, we are 100% pasture fed, beef and hogget. Everybody who can metabolize grass and pasture in general eats it, but obviously with hens and with pigs, I say obviously, there are people who do pasture them, but with the size of land we have, they do need some grain input. So everything is slow growing, and the cattle and the sheep, they are input free. They have Himalayan salt licks, they have hay in winter. The ewes at the moment, the lambing is uppermost in my mind. The ewes will have a few organic nuts, but we are looking to find a substitution for that and transition out. We're just kicking off our Pasture for Life certification. Pasture for Life, if you don't know, is the UK independently certified body for 100% pasture-fed beef or meat and dairy. We sell our meat direct to customers. I have set up a box scheme, and we also serve a community shop, and we serve also the Forest of Dean food hub. We have a growing veg box scheme that's starting to take off, and especially since the pandemic, I think people are more concerned about local and supporting perhaps their local farmer, getting curious where their food comes from, and even they may have noticed that the supply chains didn't really support them at the beginning of the pandemic. We try not to waste anything, so our sheepskins, they go off to be organically tanned, and we sell those separately. Most importantly, and this is rather a couple of examples of our pasture, and on the left you can see the diversity of sward there. So in particular you can see some of the clover, you can see the plantain, and the little yellow flower, the name of which suddenly escapes me for some reason, is absolutely critical in playing an anti-wormer, so an anti-anthelmic role within our sheep. And we don't use anti-anthelmics on the sheep. We use clean pasture to move them sufficiently frequently, and the cattle and the sheep together work to keep the worm burden very low. So back to our system again. Our herd is a suckler herd of beef cattle. And hang on, let me do this. There you go. I hope you can see. Can you see the little calf suckling from her mum? So we see it as we're farming with nature. We're not going against nature. We pay attention to what we see in nature. It's biology, not chemistry, if you like. So as I said, there are no artificial inputs from weed killers to anti-wormers, any of those things. But we do use native breeds, and native breeds, they thrive on the pasture that we have. And of course, they need to, because otherwise they're not going to be doing the job that we need for us. We pride ourselves on the very high welfare standards that we have for the animals. There's no question they have a good life, and we certainly are not interested in stocking in that way. In fact, I would say that where you're looking at our livestock unit per hectare or per acre, we are to perhaps conventional farmers understocked, but I find it quite reductive to talk about animals as livestock units. We treasure our resources, we use what we have, so we try to buy in minimal and use exactly what we have in order to make things work. So an example of that is we have 3 willow with 3 ponds with willows around them to clean our wastewater, and those willows we will cut and use for the cattle in the barn in the winter, and they also use them as scratching devices, which they're very keen on. We divide up, our fields are pretty big, so we divide them up into smaller paddocks using electric fencing. It's not true mob grazing, but it's not far off, so we move everybody once a day, smaller paddocks, in order that they are able to, what do they say? They say allow the herd to graze a third, to trample a third, and to leave a third. So that's our aim. So in other words, we do not we do not leave them in the field for any longer than probably 24 hours, sometimes 2 days. It depends on how the grass is doing. So all of this adds up to a regenerative farming practice. So we are a regenerative farm. I do use homeopathy, not because I think it replaces conventional vets, far from it. We will use conventional vets where we need to, but for things like maybe a strain, taking animals to the abattoir. I moved some ewes and lambs this morning, so I will use homeopathy within their transport to keep them calm, and it really works. I would say, and I've mentioned no anti-anthelmics, but biting flies, they are tricky. I haven't yet found the perfect natural spot-on treatment that would do that, and actually that becomes an animal welfare issue. We certainly don't want the sheep getting fly strikes. So I'm afraid, if I need to, I will use a more chemical-based anti-fly spot-on treatment if I need to. Yeah, why do we do this, really? Well, sometimes in the winter, I can assure you we ask ourselves that. So you can see that little picture there of the cattle in the barn. And when it's very muddy and cold and wet and windy, we do wonder. But why do we do it? Well, because for me, and I think it's certainly becoming more and more well known, that the grain the world produces is better off being used to feed humans if it has to be produced in the first place, rather than ruminants. Ruminants don't naturally thrive or enjoy eating grain. So it's about animal welfare, and it's about producing the kind of biodiversity that we can get from maintaining our grasslands to the most high standards that we can. You'll notice there's a sort of rather complicated looking set of bar charts there. This is some research that was recently done by Newcastle University, and it was comparing 100% pasture-fed beef with supermarket organic and with conservation grazing and supermarket non-organic beef. Now, human beings generally, what we need is we need lots of omega-3s. We don't need lots of omega-6s. Omega-6s tend to be very rich in our Western diet and block us from absorbing the omega-3s. So if you're looking closely at the bar charts, you'll notice that conservation grazing and 100% pasture beef is very high in omega-3s and very low in omega-6s. If you want to know more about that piece of research, I can provide you with the details there. So all in all, it means that we're producing very nutritious food. So it's good for you. And some people who are on paleo diets, who perhaps have an intolerance to wheat, will specify that they want 100% pasture-fed meat and dairy. We are off-grid, so we reduce our fossil fuel wherever we can. We have a bunch of solar panels. Soil health is critical, because without the soil health, we don't have the grass, we don't have the biodiversity. So we try to mimic nature and reduce any bare patches around water drinkers, etc., or gateways wherever we can. And my own philosophy is if I'm putting all this effort into animals, I take them from birth to the plate. I'm not taking them to market, and I'm certainly not going to give someone else the value that I create in those animals, which is why we go direct to customers. And I think I touched on it earlier, didn't I, when I said I'm not really keen on livestock units. And that was a bit of a throwaway remark, but I do think that we're talking about produce here, not commodities. We're talking about farming, producing good food, not industrial farming. And we would like to think that we're a price maker, not a price taker. So we do achieve a premium for the meat that we produce. And some people say, well, what is this pasture fed then? Well, you can see some of my Shetland sheep there having a good old time on a grassy bank here in Herefordshire. And I'll play the video. This is a herd of my herd of traditional Herefords in a little bit of our woodland in the summer. And they're having a good old nibble on some ash saplings. They have a good scratch on things. They look for the odd bramble. I think there's a perry tree there as well, so they will eat the odd pear, etc., etc. But you can see that's something that augments their diet over and above grass. And who wants to eat the same thing every day, right? I certainly don't, and I don't. Pigs, yeah, that's Anna, my wife, with 2 pigs, and one of them, or 2 on the right hand side there. Pigs, we first of all this year we had 4, and we used a small piece of land that was already rather bare, and it was still bare in the summer, as you can see. So we're wondering how to reseed that this spring, and we're hoping that this spring, early summer, to put the pigs in our woodland, and to see what they might do there, how they'll thrive, and perhaps reduce the amount of grain-based feeds that they need if they're eating roots, etc., etc. Now, the backstory. Yes, so let me tell you a little bit about how I got here. So Toby is actually on the call at the minute. Toby and my brother Jeffrey, they both are RAU alumni. And I was told by another alumni, or alumnus, as I was told yesterday, that she'd learned nothing about farming at the RAU and all about running a business. So I thought that was kind of an interesting observation. So my career until 2017, 2018 was in the media. So these are some of the guys that I worked for: Apple, BBC, ITV, Discovery, Food Network. And I was a digital strategist, basically. So anything to do with websites and digital content and phones and mobile, etc. And I also trained as an executive coach back in 2011. But you know what? And this was a bit, 3 pictures here, sort of a bit about my life, working in London, commuting on the train. And I loved it. I loved every bit of it, you know, and I got to have dinner in fancy restaurants in the city on the right-hand side when someone was leaving. But eventually something else was calling me, and I wasn't quite sure what it was right then. Maybe it was those nuts that I mentioned earlier. So I moved to Sussex and I commuted on the train back into London. And still the thing that was mattering was surfacing more and more in my life. So I wanted to be outdoors more. I wanted to be connected to the seasons. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. But then I've done a little bit of looking back on it. So Toby, you'll remember this. My toy farm was given to me when I was 4, and I absolutely loved it. It was a board of chipboard, that's it. And my brother and my mother had painted on it grassland. Thank goodness it was grassland, not arable. A pond and various other bits and pieces. They made me a farmhouse, a barn, a little area for my hens. And I had those, you know, Britain plastic animals. I absolutely loved it. I found myself frequently chewing the tines on my hay bob, and my other brother threw my tractor across the room and smashed it, which I was very upset about. But that was my favourite thing I ever had. And as a teenager, I grew up partly in Herefordshire and partly in West Wales. I worked on farms, but you know, I began to see that farming practices were not what I had hoped for. That actually, it wasn't that the people were at fault, but they were being seduced into systems that I didn't think were welfare friendly for the animals, certainly. Also at 12, yes, I did want to be a hippie, and I wanted to be self-sufficient, and I did know who John Seymour was. If you don't know who John Seymour is or was, you better Google him, but all about self-sufficiency. And then I forgot all about that because I got into the media. But then I suppose from about 2010, I got much more curious about food and farming. And as I was in Sussex, if you don't know Plorhatch and Tablehurst farms, they're both community farms, they're biodynamic, and I got much closer to their practice. I was obviously eating their food, vegetables, dairy, cheese, meat, and it seemed to me to be a refreshing evolution from what I'd noticed as a teenager. So there you go, the squirrel hadn't forgotten there. Anyway, I also have my own business now as I'm farming, and farming doesn't always pay all of the bills. So I'm an executive coach, a facilitator. I do digital marketing and strategy and get on with stuff. So that's Kate Bradshaw Associates, some of my clients, yada, yada, yada. But I thought I'd share with you what perhaps the recipe might be. And my recipe is emergent, evolving, constantly changing. But broadly, you'll find your own, but here's mine. So we try to use everything we have. I think I said we treasure resources. So this is a really old trailer on the left. You could probably see it's an ancient thing. Predominantly at the time, I guess, when it was made, it was a tipping trailer, but lots of oak planks, and it sat in the farmyard for years with nobody giving it any love or attention. And though everyone would, they didn't know how to fix it, and it would require welding and this, that, and the other. Anyway, this winter, I managed to, through a friend, I found a guy from Portugal, and he fixed it up for me brilliantly with wood, and it all works, and it's perfect. Ferguson on the right-hand side, I think it's from the early 50s. Someone will probably tell me that. The Fergie has a little job. The Fergie's used for cutting wood and for hay turning. And given its age, and you can see in the left-hand picture on the right-hand side, there's a small compact Chinese tractor. The Fergie is so much better. It's just beautiful to drive. It knows what it's doing, and it never seems to go wrong. So we do have access to other larger machinery if we need it, but by and large, we don't need it. And if I do need it, I'd use a contractor, except for mucking out maybe. Yeah, failure. You have to learn fast. We learned very quickly that, guess what, foxes eat chickens. No, we knew that already. That's pretty obvious, right? But it was Easter, and it was a beautiful weekend, and we were moving the hen houses, and we were moving the fencing, and we thought the chickens would get back in their house that night, and we didn't switch the electric fence on. So we came back the following day, because we don't live on the farm, to find hen bodies everywhere. So that was a very distressing thing, and could have been avoided. So yeah, you learn, don't make mistakes. There's no need to make mistakes. Acceptance. Death is also, I know people say where there's livestock, there's dead stock, but I confess I try not to produce much dead stock, more focused on the livestock. But this little girl, in October, she had been born in July, and she got sick. And by the time the vet arrived and we worked out what it was, unfortunately, she did indeed die. The vet, post-mortem, which was done on the farm, and I watched closely with interest, he thought it was acorn poisoning, which is possible, but you know, I berated myself for not doing anything sooner, although I don't think we could have done if it really were to have been acorn poisoning. Yeah, the rewards are really immense, and you'll notice here that this little guy on the left and the traditional Hereford on the right, they are not the same colour, because they're not actually blood relatives. So that's dogwood on the left, and it's Sylvine on the right. Sylvine, I used to call her the comedy cow, because she looked to me as if she was getting sizable. And on one day I looked at her and I thought, if I didn't know better, I'd think you're going to calve. And it was August, and we do calving in end of June, beginning of July. Anyway, the following day, unfortunately, she had a calf, but the calf had died during birth. Possibly, looking at it, it was possible that it had suffocated in the birth canal. Anyway, so what was I going to do? I had no idea what I was going to do, other than mourn the loss of this calf. So the Pasture for Life guys, their members forum is just full of advice and useful info. So I asked them, and they straight away said, well, you could go to a local organic farm and you could pick up a calf, and you could, put the calf and Sylvine in the barn, and they'll soon get to know each other and carry on. It'll be fine. So I nipped up the road, I got an organic calf, I went back, I put it in the barn with Sylvine, and she said, I hate it. I'd rather kick this thing to death than have it. So all day I spent, come on, you're going to love each other. I got gates. I did everything that I was told to do. No, she wasn't having any of it. And he was getting hungrier and hungrier. And I noticed one person on the forum said, if you get desperate, what they used to do in the old days, and they do with lambs, of course, is skin the dead calf and put it on the new one. So I did. I thought, I've got nothing to lose now. So I found the dead calf. It was in a wheelbarrow. I skinned a little sort of tea towel. I'm not very good at skinning. Tea towel shape. And the moment I walked over and just was about to drop it on the adoptee calf, Sylvine was making all the right mummy noises. It was magical. It was incredible that smell for her had instantly triggered, this is my calf. And they never looked back, really. Started feeding the following day. Cows are smart things. They know what's right. You can't do everything yourself. The gift economy, hugely important to us. Our neighbour Gerald there, we're not great at mechanics. He loves mechanics, so that's perfect. The picture on the right is a neighbour of ours doing his Ryland sheep, but he does our shearing, which is always, you know, it's good fun. We do pay him. We're not completely doing it for nothing, but it's all about, it's almost a connection with again, a seasonal moment, which when shearing comes around, we love it. It's good fun. And haymaking, we rely a lot on friends to help us. We make small bales, you'll see that there, mostly because we can maneuver them ourselves on the farm without having to use our tractors or other items. That may change. We've experimented a bit with larger bales this year, but we still prefer the smaller ones. Yeah, try to adapt. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need other things. You need to be constantly moving forward. So more of that in a second. Am I banging on for too long? No, I'm okay. Diversify as well. As I said, this is an example of one of our organically tanned sheepskins. I've started the veg box scheme. So have different revenue sources so that you know you're not dependent on one particular thing. We built a barn. This is our wooden barn. We built a wooden barn because we wanted to minimise the use of concrete and steel. Hereford's in there. But when we built the barn, we displaced a lot of topsoil. So I started a garden with the topsoil. So again, it's about using what you have. It's about seeing ahead. What's the potential here? What's the possibility here? Plant hedges and trees. This is one of our hedges which we've planted over the winter. We are in countryside stewardship, so we did have some support with that. We had our neighbours as well helping us with the collars for all the whips. We've since put in some trees as well, and we'll do the same next winter at another fence. That is about 250 metres, so it was quite an undertaking in December and January when it was rather chilly. Notice what you have. So we have, as I said, a woodland. The woodland looked on the left. It was very hard to see exactly what was there. So we did a bit of clearing over winter with brambles. We've repaired the fencing. We abut a golf course. So my nightmare is always that somehow our animals are going to get on the golf course. But luckily, touch wood, that has never happened because that could put a strain on things. But the fence now has been repaired and we have cleared some of the brambles and brash. Not so far that there isn't still plenty of room for the badgers who live there and other wildlife, but it does mean we might be able to have a patch there where we can put the pigs in, which I mentioned. And I'm also very keen to explore outwintering our cattle, potentially partly in the woods and partly in the fields with bale grazing. Yes, choose carefully what animals you want, what you want to do, where you want to do it. You do have to learn to tow if you want to take your animals anywhere, whether you use the market or the abattoir, and learn to let go. You know, it is a sad day when we take our animals to the abattoir, but we do give them praise and we give them thanks, and we respect them for the magic that they do with grass. And that's a picture there, a stamp of the very first beef carcass that we took to the wonderful Broome Hall abattoir, which is the other side of, well, between here and Stroud, really. Yeah, it's important when you're working really hard, you often don't notice what you have achieved or what you've done. So you do need time to reflect. You know, can you do it better? Can you build on it? Is it not really working? Stop doing it. And just notice what's going on. A lot of our farming is about noticing what the animals are doing, noticing, observing, spending time looking, because they will surely give you clues as to their health or if something's wrong, or in fact they just don't want you at all, go away, which is more often than not. Yeah, I don't put up, this is, we borrow a bull every year, not always the same bull, I hasten to add. Don't put up with stuff. You know, people will tell you, oh, you can't do that or you can't do this. And there's lots of wisdom out there, but there's also many assumptions that people might make about your system. And you can learn from people and say, well, that's interesting, I'll do that, but I don't have to do that. So I think perhaps some of our neighbours at first thought we were, you know, bonkers. You can't finish Herefords on pasture alone. You certainly, Shetland sheep, they are comedy sheep, you don't need them, but actually I think we've proved them wrong there, and there's a lot more respect perhaps coming forward. We're heading towards profitable. We're not entirely profitable yet because we are putting a lot of infrastructure back into the land, and once that's done, I think we'll be in a better position. But don't overlook the work that you put into it. You know, you can go direct, and I desperately need to scale. More of that in a minute, and you will have to do other stuff to pay the bills, although I guess it depends what bills you have to pay. So the future coming soon. Okay, so hogget. Let me take a sip. What is hogget? So hogget is lamb between 1 and 2 years old. So we take our Shetlands up to in the region of 18 months before we take them to slaughter. And that's because they are slow growing. They have a good life on pasture, as I say, and it tastes fantastic and it sells out every year. So we will be expanding our hogget operation certainly from this autumn. And generally we try to take our male stock, sorry guys, to slaughter, but as and when we feel we've perhaps got the right breeding ewes and breeding cattle, then I might consider either selling the girls or possibly sending them for meat. Our wool, I'm sure many of you know wool. I was going to say it's got a bad rep. It hasn't got a bad rep at all, but it just doesn't, it's not paid well when it comes taking it to the British Wool Board. So we'd like to do more of that, and there is some interest certainly in fashion for regenerative wool. I'm part of a leather project with cattle hides via the PFLA, where 2 fashion designers have taken, I think, 10, 15 leather hides from Broomhall. They're curing them and they're going to take them all the way through to becoming objects, bags, boots, coats, jackets, whatever, and they'll even have the whole provenance around them, so with the cattle name. That's a little WhatsApp message there in the middle from a friend of mine. I've tried to obviously cover up the expletive, but that was so great in our first year to find out that somebody thought of our beef as being that good. TBC, this one is, I'm working at the moment, and Ruth, who's on this call, she knows much more about this than I, but I haven't said where it is. There's an opportunity to manage a beautiful piece of land on the edge of the Wye, on the cusp of a city. Can't imagine which city that might be, which is about restoring it to the glory of floodplain meadows, as well as being extremely collaborative with local people, and of course the potential there to sell 100% pasture fed beef locally. So fantastic food for local people, and what more, you know, how local can you go when you can look out of the window potentially and see our herd of Herefords. It's a big step up for us, so it is TBC, but I'm very excited about the potential there, even to expand it into orchards or into an agricultural growing scheme, horticultural scheme rather. I'm looking for someone to help me expand the garden, the veg box scheme, someone who's as keen as I am to get involved and grow organic fruit and vegetables. I'm bringing my coaching experience into the farm. I'm creating a kind of a personal development program called Landing, which is about using the land, the animals, and the process of doing to give people a chance to get out of their heads. So many people are in their heads, you know, we're stuck on these seats, we're stuck with computers, and I've noticed not only the mental health benefits of being with animals, but actually the doing on the farm. Obviously with COVID, that may be a longer term ambition, but I think there's certainly plenty of opportunities there. I'm keen to start measuring our biodiversity, and I know there's I use the soil sector soil app for measuring our soil. I'm just about to start doing that, but I don't know of an app for biodiversity yet, and I think there's lots of farmers looking for that. There's the carbon toolkit for farms I'm going to start. I just want to show you something here. This is, you'll probably say, oh, it's a pile of old thistles. Yeah, it is a pile of old thistles. The old thistles, they got uncomfy. They got displaced by the soil from the barn. I wasn't able to cultivate them in the first year, and of course they grew up next to my vegetable garden, and everyone was saying, oh, you're going to get thistles everywhere in your field and look out. I didn't. I just had wonderful amounts of butterflies, insects, bees, and I had no insect predators on my crop at all. So that was an eye-opener for me. It's hard to film it and be able to show all those wee bugs, but on this particular day it was alive with insect life. And there's a question here about, well, how do you measure contentment? So you can see here, this is some of our herd hanging out in the field in late summer with their calves, because of course the suckler herd demands the calves will stay with their mums, and obviously they will then be carrying on within the herd. That's those guys. And I'm going to end with, well, how on earth did this happen? So Margaret Rigby, she was a friend of my mother's when I lived in Herefordshire, which we moved to when I was 4. And Margaret was an inspiration for me then as a kid, even though she was pretty terrifying, actually. And we stayed in touch. We stayed as friends. Margaret took on a farm in 1977, which is Tanhouse Farm, and she farmed it for 40 odd years. In 2017, she got diagnosed with cancer and was unable to carry on. 2 weeks before she died, I made this little video with her, and I'm going to share it with you because I think it's inspirational. So here we go.
Looking very good. And frankly, I suppose those who've got 20 years of experience might be able to tell you, but I find it difficult to imagine or to get it right as to how things are going to turn out, and it's often different. But,
because it's nature, do you think?
Oh, I think so, yes, absolutely. Yes. I am fortunate.
Fortunate?
Well, to be able to have all this. I know I've engineered it to a degree, of course, but it's I am fortunate nevertheless to be able to have it. So it means, it means a lot to me.
I know, it means everything to you.
Yes, it does. It is attractive.
Massively.
What are you doing? What are you eating? Funny dog.
I think she's enjoying eating your grass, Margaret.
Yes.
She's eaten a fair amount of it since she got here, so there must be something very tasty.
It's unadulterated, isn't it?
Yeah.
I must say, Fred has been very clever to do the droppings where he has.
Yes, he's managed to squeeze in.
Yes. Lift his tail.
Between the willows.
Yes.
Maybe he had a little scratch while he was
Maybe he did.
here at the same time.
Because they might not have been in leaf either.
Yeah. Well, you say luck, but as you say, you have engineered it, but you've worked really hard to make sure
Yes, I've worked.
it's what it is.
It's a curious thing to say, but I've worked very hard to make it as natural as possible.
Yes.
It seems strange things to say, but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
To look as though somebody isn't really interfering all the time. It takes, as you can see, it takes years. But it's good.
Where did you get your ideas from of how to, create this garden, create the ponds, the planting? How did you know to do that?
I must have absorbed things.
I'll move on there. She just said she must have absorbed things and read stuff. Anyway, that is me. That is Tan House Farm. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter and Facebook, or you can email us. I'm not sure if it was what you were expecting or not, because who knows what one has to say to the prestigious Royal Agricultural University, but I'm here certainly to take questions. So if you have questions, please